Hey guys, in this comprehensive Capture One course, we'll be covering every aspect of Capture One from start to finish. And with no further ado, let's get started. So for the first step, we are going to create a new catalog. So click on New Catalog. Now you give it a name. For this, we are going to name this CC, which stands for Capture One course. Then the location, you can leave the location at default, or you click on this three-dot button right here to choose the folder where you want to save your new catalog to. And when you're okay with that, you can select the folder. But for this, we are going to cancel it. Now click on OK. So if this is your first time in Capture One, this is the interface you're going to see. So just come and click on Import Images. Now click on Choose Folder. Go to the folder where your image file is, click on it, Review for import. Now click on Image, just like this. Now import one image into Capture One. Right here you see no images selected, so click on this image to select it. Capture One basically has 4 interface elements. The first is the 2-tab bar. You have the cursor tools, we have the image browser, and then right here we have the viewer. So we are going to cover every aspect of this interface element from start to finish. We also have the menu tab right here, which has different functions we are going to cover. So stick around as we go from start to finish. The first area is the toolbar area that contains all the adjustments we are going to be applying on this image. Capture One basically has 2 methods of editing and processing your image. The first is the general editing and processing, where every adjustment you make affects every area of the image. The second is the targeted adjustment or the selected adjustment, where you mark a particular area and then you make specific adjustment to that area. So we are going to cover the first type of editing in Capture One, which is the general overall editing, where we balance this image to get the best information out of the raw image before we go on to edit the image using selected adjustment. So for the first section, we are going to explore the exposure tool tab. Now we have the histogram. It shows all the tonal values in your photo. So this is the histogram, and it contains all the information concerning the pixels. And when you make adjustments, you can see that it will also affect this histogram right here. Right here in the histogram, you can see right now that we have higher bars in this left corner, which is the dark point or the black point of your image, which is the shadow area. And then for the white point, which is the right side of the histogram, we have less information, which indicates that the image is slightly underexposed. So when we go through the editing, when we go and balance things out, you see that this graph is going to stretch out to show that the tonal values have now been balanced across the tonal range of the image. So for the histogram, we are going to skip the layers and the style brush, which is used for targeted adjustment, and we are going to come right here to white balance. So for the white balance, we can use the white balance to achieve neutral gray and have natural colors in our image. And for the white balance, you can see right here we have this magic wand that you can use to auto white balance your image. So if you click on it like this, Capture One is going to automatically make adjustments to the white balance. And if you're okay with that, you can use that. If you are not okay, we'll go on to manually adjust this. So you can see this. You can copy the white balance setting from this image and apply it to another image. You can also reset the white balance. Let's click on reset. So we've reset the white balance. And now from here we go on to the mode. The mode is on short right now, which is exactly how it is from when we took this image. You can set it to auto, which is the same thing as clicking on this auto button right here, or you can set it to daylight, shades, cloud, or any of the other presets. But most times we are going to leave it on shoot, and we are going to manually make adjustments. The Kelvin slider here, in other raw processing software, this is called the temperature slider. It basically warms the image or cools the image. So if your image is originally looking too warm, you can cool it off by moving the slider to the left. And if your image is originally too cool, you can warm it up by moving the slider to the right. And if it doesn't need any of these adjustments, you can just leave it as it is from shoot. So for this, we are going to adjust it to 400. So if you have a style, a particular style, it involves every adjustment you make. So for this image, I'm going to leave it at 4,000. So 4,000. The tint slider can be used to add green to the image or add purple to the image. So if your image is looking greenish, you can move it to the right to add purple to your image. And if your image has too much purple in it, you can move it to the left to add green to it. For this image, we are going to move it to the right, and we are going to move it to the value of 4. So because we are going for a particular style, we'll move the tint to 4. Like this. Another thing in the white balance we are going to take note of is the hand picker tool, the eyedropper tool right here. You can use it to pick the gray area of the image, or let me say the place that is supposed to be gray. And for portrait like this, the eye is the area that is most close to gray. So you can click on the eye and it's going to automatically adjust the white balance for you. But for this image, we are going to manually impute 4,000, and the tint we are going to impute 4, just like this. Impute 4. So that is all there is to white balance. From white balance, we are going to go on to exposure. For the exposure, you can see it also has auto, copy, and reset, and presets. Very similar to the white balance buttons. For the exposure, you can see there's this exposure slider that basically increases the brightness of the overall image or reduces the brightness. So if your image is underexposed, you can increase the brightness like this. If your image is overexposed, you can reduce the brightness. For this, we are going to slightly increase the brightness, since the histogram is indicating that the image is slightly underexposed. So we increase the brightness like this. So this is the contrast. If you move the contrast slider to the right, your image is going to become more dramatic. If you move it to the left, it's going to flatten your image. For this stage of the editing, you are not going to move the contrast at all. You are going to leave the value at 0. Now the brightness slider is going to increase the brightness of your image. If you move the brightness slider like this, it's going to increase the brightness of your image. If you move it to the left, it's going to reduce the brightness of your image. It's very similar to the exposure. For this image, we are going to move it slightly to the left. Now we have the saturation. If you increase the saturation, it's going to increase the saturation of the overall image. If you move it to the right, you can see the value increases to 100. And if your image is originally undersaturated, you can increase the saturation. If it's oversaturated, you can reduce the saturation, just like this. For this image, we're going to increase the saturation slightly. Increase the saturation to 10. So that is all there is to exposure. Now we'll move on to high dynamic range. Now we'll move on to high dynamic range. So we have the highlight, the shadow, the white, and the black. The slider in the high dynamic range section is used to bring back details into your raw image. So if your image has too much highlight, like this, if your image is having too much highlight, you can recover details in the highlight section of your image by moving it to the left like this. If you move it to the left, you are going to recover details and bring out more details in the bright areas of your image. Now for the shadow, if you move the shadow down like this, you are going to increase the shadow. You're going to darken the shadow area of your image. If you move it like this, you're going to recover details in the dark portion of your image, but you can see it's going to flatten the image, and that's not realistic. So if you're moving this, just move it slightly to recover details in the shadow area of your image. Now the white slider controls the white point of your image, which is the brightest point of your image. If you increase it, you are going to increase the white point, meaning you are going to make more portion of your image white, that is brighter. And if you reduce it, you are going to recover details in the white area. So we are going to reduce this to -100. The highlight, you are going to reduce it also to -100. Then the black is the darkest point of your image, is the opposite of the white. If you move it to the right like this, you are going to recover details in the dark portion or the darkest portion of your image. If you move it to the right, it's going to flatten your image. If you move it to the left, it's going to add contrast to your image. So for this, you are going to slightly move it to the left like this. -20 is okay. So that's all there is to the high dynamic range. Now we are going to move on to the clarity section. So for the clarity, we have some presets in the method. You can choose the natural clarity, the punch, the neutral, and the classic. You have to try this out in real time to see exactly how it affects your image. So if you increase the clarity, it's going to increase the contrast at the edge of your image. So if you increase the clarity like this, it's going to increase the edge contrast. Everywhere there's edge, it's going to increase the contrast at that area. If you reduce it, it's going to soften the edge like this. So this is exactly how it affects. And these are other methods. You can try the method to see exactly the difference. Because you see, this punch is somehow giving the image a dreamy look. This is somehow stylized. You can use it after editing your image. This is not advisable when you are just balancing the raw image. So we are going to set it at natural. And we're going to reduce this to 0 for this particular point of the retouching process. Now we have the structure. If you increase it, it's going to add the structure to your image. You can see exactly how it works in real time, meaning it's going to give more structure to individual pixels. And if you reduce it, you see the effect in real time. So this is good when you are sharpening or adding that punch to your image. But right now, you're going to leave it at +11, somewhere like this. Now, that's all there is to clarity. We'll move on to the haze. For the dehaze section, you can increase the dehaze amount to remove any haze if there's haze on your image. And if you want to add haze to your image to acquire or achieve any stylized effect, you can do it like this. So this is exactly how it works. If you have any hazy, if you are shooting in a fog environment and you have haze on your lens, you can use this slider to adjust it. This image was shot in the studio, so it doesn't have any haze. So we are going to reduce the amount to 0, just like this. You have the shadow tone is on auto. You can set it manually. so that you can choose a particular tone for your shadow. But for this, we are going to leave it on auto, because it's looking alright. And that is all there is to the haze section. From that, we'll move to the levels. The levels adjustment is present in almost all video editing, photo editing, and graphic designing softwares. Now, the levels has 3 sections. We have the dark or the shadow area right at the extreme left corner. We have the mid-tone. This is called the gamma slider. This is the mid-tone area. This slider controls the mid-tone. And then we have the white point right here. If you look at the levels, you can see that it has this histogram. So if you make adjustment right here, like this anchor point below here is the dark point. If you move the dark point to the right, you are going to increase the black point. It's very, very similar to this black point we have in the dynamic range. It's very similar to this black point. So you can do that right in the levels also. And this is in the RGB section. So if you move this slider, you can use it to add contrast to your image like this. If you move it, you are increasing the black point. Now, if you move the one at the top, you are going to reduce the black point. It's very, very similar to the dynamic range section here. Very similar to this slider right here. Very, very similar. So we have the midpoint where if you move this midpoint right here, you are going to darken the mid section of the image. If you move this, you are going to brighten the mid-tone area. This brightening of the mid-tone area, this is darkening of the mid-tone area. You can see what is happening in the histogram right here. So for this image, you are going to leave it, or let's darken it a little bit. We are going to darken it a little bit. The white point, if you move the white point like this, you are going to increase the white point by brightening the brightest point. You are going to increase the brightness of the brightest point of the image. And if you move this, you are going to darken the brightest point of the image. So we are going to darken it a little bit. So this can also be done to the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel. The effect is very similar, and this can be used for color grading. But for this particular section of the raw image processing, we are not going to do anything right here. We're just going to make adjustment to the RGB section, which is the tonal range section. You can also use the hand picker tool here. You can use this picker tool to set the point. If you choose this point as the darkest point, you can see the selection is going to make. You can do the same thing for the brightest point. If you choose this section for the brightest point, you see exactly what it does. So we are going to reset this, and then we are going to manually add it slightly like this. So you have several options to make adjustment to your image in the levels adjustment section. So that's all there is for the levels. Now we go to the curve. The curve also is very similar to the levels, but for the curve, instead of targeting only the darkest point, the brightest point, and the mid-tone, we have option to target any other point on our image. You can create point by clicking on the curves like this, create point, so that I can make particular tonal adjustment to a particular area of the curve. And one of the most popular way of using the curve is to add contrast to the image. So if you create one point like this, create another point like this, you can create the popular S curve by moving the shadow down and taking the highlights up like this. So this is how to add contrast to your image. This obviously too much, so we are going to return it. Now we are going to return this as well. So that's it. And we can also use this to make other adjustments to our images like this. So this is the RGB curve, and this is how you use the RGB curve. This is the brightest point. This is the brightest point. You can increase the brightest point by moving the slider or this point to the left like this, and you can also move it down like this to increase the brightness. Move it here to darken, move it here to increase. And by creating this point here, you are going to adjust only this area like this, while this other area goes in an inverse way. But if you remove this point, you can see exactly how it's going to affect the overall image. If you create a point right here, you can see exactly how it works. So the curve is a very sophisticated and very complex adjustment option in your photo editing software. So we are going to go more in depth using the curve as we go on in the editing process. So this is the RGB curve, this is the Luma curve. It affects only the luminosity. The RGB affects both the color and the luminosity, that is the color and the brightness, while the Luma affects only the brightness. You can see exactly how that affects your image. This only affects the brightness or the exposure without altering the color, while this affects both the color and the brightness at the same time. Now we also have the red channel, the green channel, and the blue channel, and you can use the curve to color grade your image. We'll go more in depth on this area of the curve as we move on with the course. And you can also use this picker tool to pick a particular section of the image. If you hover this hand picker, you see the particular tonal range of the image in real time. If you click on a particular area, you can come and move it up or move it down like this. So if you want to target a particular area, just use this hand picker and target that area. This is the midtone, this is the shadow, this is the darkest point, and like that. So that's all there is. We are going to reset this, and that's all there is to curves in Capture One. And the vignette is for stylizing your image, and this is not necessary for this particular section, but you can see if you move it to the left, you are going to add a dark vignette. If you move it to the right, you are going to add a white vignette. That is exactly how to use the vignette. And we have methods: the elliptic on crop, you have the circular on crop, and have the circular. So you can try out these other options to see how they affect your image. They are just different styles that you have to explore to see how it works in real time. So that's all there is to the exposure section of the Capture One 2 tab bar. Now you can also add more tools by right clicking, add tool, and you can see you can add any other tool, and you can remove a particular tool. Let's remove this vignetting tool. If you click right here, you can add the vignetting tool back. So you're going to search for it, vignetting, and it will come back like this. You can remove any tool and you can customize the interface to your taste. So now we are going to go to the color tab. So in the color tab, you can still see we have the white balance, because the white balance affects both the color and the exposure. So you are going to see it. You can see the changes we made to the white balance are still the changes that are right here. So that's it. And you can see the basic characteristic, the ICC profile. This image was shot with Canon EOS 5D Mark IV. And you can change it to generic. Don't leave this at default, just leave it at default. The curve is on auto. You can change the curve to film extra shadow, film high contrast. Most times leave it at default. The image is Capture One 2020-2021. So that is the basic characteristic of this image. Now we have already covered the white balance. Now go on to the color editor. For the color editor, we have the basic section. In the color editor, you can see we have the red color, the orange color, the yellow, the green, the cyan, the blue, the magenta, and we have the pink color. And also we have the hue color here, where we can adjust the overall hue, the saturation, and the lightness. So for the reds, you can use this to change the particular hue of your red. If your red is having too much magenta in it, you can adjust it and add some orange to your red like this. And if it's too saturated, if the red is too saturated, you can reduce the saturation. If it's undersaturated, you can increase the saturation. Let's increase the saturation. The brightness, you can increase the brightness of only the red colors, and you can reduce the brightness. Let's increase it a little bit. So the color editor basically allows you to adjust the hue, saturation, and lightness of individual colors in your images. So we can do the same thing for the orange. You can make your orange to look more reddish. The skin tone is in the red and orange section. So if you want to target and make adjustment to your skin tone, this is the area you are going to move the sliders. The hue of the orange affects the skin tone. So you can add more magenta, or you can add more yellow, which is going to make your skin tone to look greenish. So let's add a little bit of magenta like this. You can increase the saturation or reduce it. Let's increase the saturation. And you can also increase or reduce the brightness. Let's reduce the brightness a little bit. The yellow, if there's too much yellow in your image, you can remove the yellow. Or you can add yellow. Let's remove the yellow. And you can increase the brightness or reduce the brightness. We are going to leave the brightness at 0. Now there's green on your image. You can adjust the hue. You can also adjust the cyan. You see, this is cyan. There's cyan here and there's cyan in the green. You can make the cyan to look more greenish, or you can make it to look more bluish. So this is the color range of the cyan. You can make individual stylized adjustment to it. The adjustment you make to your color are going to be a creative process. Most time there's no right or wrong color. So you just have to understand color theory and put that in mind when you make adjustment to this particular section. So for this, I'm going to add more blue to the cyan. And if there's blue in your image, you can also make adjustment to the blue. You have blue here, you need to make it more cyan. And I'm going to reduce the saturation so that the black tie here is going to look as black as possible. I'm going to reduce also the brightness. If there's magenta in this image, I don't want magenta, so I'm going to desaturate it like this. There's purple, I'm going to desaturate it because I don't want purple in my image. If you want purple and you want to add purple, you can add purple. The more present the color is in the original image, the more the effect of this adjustment is going to be applied on that image. So that's it. And you can also see this is the hue. You can basically adjust the overall hue, just like the overall hue of the image. So for this, we are going to leave it at 0 because I don't want to adjust it, just like this. Now this is the basic color editor. We have the advanced color editor. You can take this hand picker and select a particular range. You can also adjust this range like this, you understand, and then you can affect the hue of this range, affect the saturation, and affect the lightness. So this is a very advanced way of adjusting colors in your image. This is very, very handy when you're color grading your image, but it's not necessary for this particular section. So we are going to reset this adjustment. We have the skin tone. So basically what this does, we can color grade our skin tone right here in the color editor. So if you take the hand picker tool and select the skin tone, it's going to select the skin tone range, and we can affect the hue. You can affect the saturation, affect the lightness of the skin tone range. You can also increase the range like this. We can affect the amount, we can affect the uniformity. So if you want to make your skin tone to be in one color, like you want to achieve a monotone, you increase the hue, amount of the uniformity of the hue like this. You can also increase the saturation, you can increase the lightness, the uniformity of the lightness. So you can see if you increase the uniformity of the lightness, it's going to flatten the lightness of the image and make most part of the skin to have the same distribution of light. If you increase the uniformity of the saturation, it's going to make every portion of the image skin tone range to have the same level of saturation. Reduce this to 0 to make our image look natural, and then we reduce this to I think 50 or there about 50. All this option we are exploring right now is not available on any other raw processing software. This is what makes Capture One very, very, very powerful. So that's it. Now we have color balance. The color balance area here has the color divided into shadow, mid-tone, and highlight. It's just like the levels that affect the tone range. This affects only the color, and you can use this for color grading and for color balancing. If your shadow is too warm, you can add blue to your shadow like this. You can add blue to your shadow. If your shadow is too bluish, you can add orange, you can add green, you can add stylized colors. We can leave it at default. This slider is for saturation. The slider right here is for saturation, 0 saturation, 100 saturation. This is for luminance. This is the highest brightness of the color. This color, the shadow color can achieve. This is the darkest range the shadow area can achieve in the color range. So we are going to return this to default. If you double tap, it returns to default. Double tap, it returns to default. So you can manually increase the saturation of the shadow like this, and then you can also affect the brightness like this. And using this particular button right here, you can change the hue of the shadow. For this particular stage of the retouching, you are going to return everything to default. Also for the mid-tone area, you can still adjust the mid-tone in the color balance. You can balance the mid-tone, you can add orange to the mid-tone, you can add green, you can add any of the color. This is the full color spectrum, and you can adjust the saturation, you can adjust the brightness, you can adjust the brightness like this. Like this particular section, you are going to leave everything as default. Same with the highlight. You can add cyan to the highlight for stylized color grading. You can adjust the saturation like this, adjust the brightness like this, return to default. Let's reset everything in the color balance. Also, there is the master, where you adjust the whole tone, the color of the whole tone. You can just adjust it like this. So as you move it, you see the effect in real time on the viewer. So let's return this to default by double clicking on it. Reset. We go to black and white. If you want black and white, enable black and white, and then you can adjust the luminosity of the individual channel, the red, the yellow, the green, the blue, and the magenta. Here you don't want black and white for this image, so we are going to toggle this off. The normalize section is actually a tab you use when you have several images imported. We're going to cover that in another section when we import more images into Capture One, because you can import multiple images or a single image like we did. So that's all there is to the color tab section of the toolbar. Now we have the detail section. The detail section, we have the navigator. We also have the layer here, and then we have the focus. You can use this to view. So you can use this to view a particular area of the image so that you can see exactly the changes that is being made there. So that is the focus section. You have the sharpening. You can increase the amount of sharpening. And then if you want to see the effect of sharpening, you have to zoom into your image. So let's zoom in. So this is the zoom in button. Zoom in. Let's zoom into our image. So if you increase the sharpening, you can see exactly how it's affecting the image in real time. When you are just starting out on your image editing, no need to add sharpening. Instead, you even reduce the sharpening, because if you increase the sharpening right now, you are going to increase the sharpening of both the defects and the overall image. So you have to first of all remove the defect before you come to make adjustments to the sharpening, come to increase the sharpening. So I hope you understand that. So right now we are going to reduce the amount. The radius affects the sampled area. If the radius is 0, it means every single pixel is sampled. If you increase the radius, you are increasing the surface area that's being affected by the sharpening effect. So you can see how it affects your image in real time by moving it like this. This is the 0 radius. If you continue to increase, it increases the radius of the affected area. So you can see exactly how that works in real time. Also the threshold, you can increase the threshold, you can reduce the threshold. If you increase the threshold is like the opposite of the radius. See how if you increase the threshold, and see when you increase the radius, see when you reduce the radius. So you can use these two sliders, play these two sliders to have the effect of the sharpening you want. So we are going to reduce the sharpening right now. You have the halo suppressor. So if there's halo in your image, you can use this effect, this slider, to adjust that there's no halo in this image, so you're not going to see that effect. If I get an image that has halo, I'm going to come back and make a more comprehensive tutorial on this particular slider so that you see how it affects the image in real time. So let's reset the sharpening and reduce the sharpening. So that's all there is to the sharpening section. Now we go to noise reduction. If there's noise in your image due to the image being shot in a low light, or if you increase your ISO too much, you are going to introduce noise to your image. The Capture One has the ability to reduce the noise using the noise reduction. So you can see and reduce the noise in the luminance, but there's no noise here, so you can barely see that this image was well lit when we're shooting it. So you cannot basically see how this particular section or this particular noise reduction affects the image. You can also increase the details and also increase or adjust the slider of the color. Single pixel, you can increase the single pixels. So all these sliders affect the noise reduction. So we are going to leave it at default. We have fine grain section. This is used to stylize your image. You can see. Let's zoom in. The fine grain section adds grain to your image. The impact is 100, 0. You can also increase the granularity of the image. That option is not available for fine grain. But if you have silver rich, you can increase this. This is very handy when you are trying to add digital skin texture, but right now it's not the stage to add grain to our image. Then we have the mirror section. You can add the amount. It affects the edge. You can see exactly how it's affecting the edge of the image right now, and the pattern. The effect is shown more when the image is shot outdoor. Images like this basically need this kind of setting. So that's all. So that's all there is to the detail section. We also have adjustments where you can apply styles and presets. You see your built-in styles here, the built-in presets here. You have your adjustment clipboards here. If you copy an adjustment, it's going to appear right here. This is the information section, the metadata section. You can explore your information right here. And this is the camera section. But for photo editing and processing in Capture One, the main section is basically the color section and the exposure section, and also the detail section that we've just covered. So at this point, we have edited and balanced the overall image, and we are now going to move into the next section, which is selective adjustment, and that will be done in the layers. So right now we are going to cover the layers in Capture One. So guys, we are done with the overall adjustment. Now we are moving on to the selected adjustment in Capture One. For this, we are going to go to the layers menu. So we are going to do this in the layers section. Layers separate your photo into different layers so you can edit one area without affecting the rest of the image. That's why selective adjustment. So the first layer you're going to see is the background layer, which is actually your image right here. If you delete this, you are going to delete your image. So you can add new layers using this plus icon right here, or coming to layer and adding new layer. Capture One basically has 4 layer styles. To access that, you click on this arrow button down here. You can see new empty adjustment layer, new field adjustment layer, new clone layer, new heel layer, and they are all different layers for different selective adjustment in Capture One. So to cover the first one, we are going to create a new empty adjustment layer. So you create a new empty adjustment layer. This layer is basically empty, meaning if you make any adjustment right now, it's not going to affect any area of the image because this is an empty adjustment layer. Let's rename this empty. So in order to make adjustment to this layer, we are going to add a marks. We are going to draw marks on a particular section of the image so that we can make adjustment to that section. So to draw the marks, we can use either the brush, we can use the magic brush, we can use the linear gradient, we can use the radial gradient, and we have other marking, which is the erase, the cloning, and the healing. But for this, we are going to use the brush. And this section right here, these tools down here, you can also see them in the cursor tools. You can see the brush. If you click on this arrow, you see the other options. So we'll pick the brush. So after selecting the brush, you come and paint on the image. As we paint, you can see the adjustment we made previously to this layer is now affecting this area of the image. Now we can adjust the brush setting, the brush size, we can adjust it like this. The hardness, we can adjust the hardness. If we move to the extreme right, you can see it's 100. If you move to the extreme left, it's 0. This is soft brush, this is hard brush, and this is in between. You can see that if it's more inclined towards the left, it means it's a softer brush. This is the harder brush, this is the hardest the brush can get. This is the softest the brush can get. We also have opacity at 100. You can reduce the opacity to 1, meaning the effect of the brush on the image is going to have the opacity value of 1, and at 100 you're going to have the opacity value of 100. The flow is the opacity of each stroke. meaning if the flow is 1, if you make a brush stroke once, it's going to add it at a 1 opacity. If you continue to make it for 100 times, it's going to have opacity of 100. If you move the brush to 50, since the flow is 50, you brush over the image like this, it's going to add the brush effect with an opacity of 50. If you move it over that same spot, 50 plus 50 is 100. So it's just like your pen. With less flow, the effect is going to be applied more gradually. With more flow, it's going to be applied more rapidly. So let's make the flow 30. This. Another option, you can see airbrush. You can tick the airbrush and use pen pressure if you're using a tablet. There's also auto mask, which automatically detects edges. It helps you to mask the applied brush faster. You have link. You can link brush with layer, eraser with brush, link, eraser with brush. So you can do basically that, but for now we are not going to check any of this. We're just going to brush over this green area of the hair tie to mask it, so that we can apply this empty layer adjustment to this portion of the image. So that's it. If you brush over this area like this, you can also zoom in. This is a zoom button. You can zoom in. If you click on the plus, you can use the Z brush, that is the Z on your keyboard. If you press on Z, you are going to zoom in. If you press like this, you are also going to zoom in. So after zooming in, you can still take a brush and continue to paint on the areas. Since the auto mask is turned on, this brush is going to take note of the edges, that is the edges of the color, and avoid those areas slightly. And you can manually do everything if you turn this auto mask off. So let's turn it off and see how it works. You turn it off, you can increase the flow like this. Let's increase the flow to 60 so that will be fast. And you can brush over this area. Let's make this kind of adjustment to the brush so that we see exactly where it's affecting. Not just that, you want to see where it's being brushed or where this layer is being applied to. You come to your layer, come to max visibility and turn on the always display max, and the mask color is red. You can change it from red in the preference tab. I'll show you that later on. Right now you can just see where it's being masked. This area is being masked, and so this area, if you turn on the mask, auto mask, so that it's going to only mask and avoid the skin tone area. So if you're maxing bleeds into area you don't want, take your eraser tool. There's the eraser, click on the eraser, it's right here, and use the shortcut E on your keyboard, and this is the eraser also on the cursor tools. So you can use the eraser to erase from areas you don't want the brush effect to be on. So if you take the eraser and erase from the skin tone area like this, so you can take your time to make this adjustment. I just want to show you how it really works. So if you masked this area out like this, roughly, come to your layer, max visibility, and turn off max visibility. You can use the M key on your keyboard to toggle between the max visibility, toggle it on and toggle it off, off, on, off. So right now you can make adjustment to this area we have maxed. So all the adjustments on this layer is going to affect only the area we've maxed. So if you increase the temperature, it's going to only increase the temperature on the maxed area. If you reduce or increase the tint, every adjustment you can apply to just this area. So that's exactly how it works. I even said using every adjustment can be applied only here. That's why it's called selective adjustment. So that's exactly how it works. You can also adjust the opacity of the layer. If you reduce the opacity to 0, it means the layer has been turned off. You can gradually increase the opacity. So Since the adjustment we've made is not a desirable adjustment, let's reduce the opacity to 0. This is not the only adjustment option you have. This is not the only max option you have. You can use the magic max. This one automatically uses AI to detect a particular area and max that area out. So if you take the magic max, which is available here and also available in the cursor tools, and then click on, let's say it's area that has the cyan color, click on this area, it's going to automatically max this area. Let's click on M to see the area it has maxed. Automatically it's going to max this area. Let's create a new empty layer. So let's click on this area like this and calculate the magic max brush. It automatically marks this area for us. So this is how it works. It marks only the color that has sampled. So right now we can come and make adjustments. So you press M on your keyboard to hide the max visibility. So now you can make adjustment to this particular color, and this doesn't stop you from still using your brush to add areas. Use your brush, your normal brush, and then max areas that the magic max did not automatically detect for us. So this one is even a way faster method. So you can see we've changed the color using these adjustments. So the other kind of layer style we have is the field adjustment layer. So the field adjustment layer is just going to fill all the areas with the max. So you create this field adjustment. Let's rename it field adjustment. So you create the field adjustment layer, you can make adjustment to all the areas. It's just like your default background layer, but this time we can use the eraser tool to remove this particular adjustment from areas we don't want. You see, you can remove the adjustment from areas we don't want. It's like the opposite of the empty adjustment. The opposite of the empty adjustment layer is the field adjustment layer. This is going to fill all the image with adjustment, while this is going to be empty. That is basically how it works. So we are going to delete this particular adjustment, or we can use right here to toggle it off. Let's just toggle it off, toggle this off, and toggle this off as well. So that's it for the field adjustment. Very simple. The other adjustment we have the new clone layer. So let's create a new clone layer. If you create a new clone layer, you can see that all the adjustment has been grayed out, meaning you cannot make any normal adjustment to this particular layer. The only adjustment you can make is using the healing brush, the clone brush, and the remove spot. So first we are going to draw healing marks. So to do that, we are going to zoom into the image. So if we zoom into our image, you can zoom out by pressing Alt on your keyboard. If you are using Windows, if you are using Macs, you press on Option key to invert the zoom in. So if you are zooming out and you press Alt, you are going to zoom in. If you are zooming in and you press Alt, you are going to zoom out like this. You can also use the mouse scroll. If you scroll down, you zoom out. If you scroll in, you zoom in. So now take your healing brush. It's available in the cursor tools, and it's also available down here in the layers adjustment section. So take your healing brush and then paint over the area you want to heal, just like this, and Capture One is going to heal the area automatically for you. Now if you click on this down arrow key, you can see You can always display layer marks, only display marks when drawing, display gray marks. You can also click on this display arrows. It's going to show us areas that Capture One has sampled from us. So if you click on this particular display arrows and it's showing display arrow, you can manually shift and adjust where it's being sampled when Capture One is healing this area for us. So this is a way to refine your adjustment. And if you right click, you can adjust the hardness. Let's reduce the hardness to 0 to soften the areas we are healing. So right now we can heal like this, heal like this. You can also adjust the opacity and the flow, but we are going to leave it at 100 for maximum effect with the first stroke. So with this, you are seeing areas that have been healed. So this is exactly how the healing brush works. And to get a more realistic result, it's good to reduce the brush size to fit over the blemish you are going to heal. So let's turn off this display so that you can easily do this faster. So if you heal a particular area and you are not satisfied with the result, you can adjust the sampled area. It's only in Capture One I've seen this kind of option. Show how powerful Capture One is. So I paint over this area, again. So this is how the healing brush works. And now we'll move on to the cloning marks. The healing brush basically heals blemishes, while the cloning marks, which is available here, cloning marks is available here. And clone area of your photo by first selecting a source point and then brushing over the target area. The cloning brush is available here and is also available here. So you can see the cursor tabs, you can see the cloning marks in the cursor tab, you can also see the cloning marks in the layers adjustment section. So you can see to clone, Alt click to define a new source point. So you first have to adjust your brush size. You can use the bracket open or bracket close. You can also use the right clicking to adjust the brush size. So you are going to hold Alt on your Windows or Option on your Mac to sample from a neat area, and then you brush over the area you want to clone. So you hold Alt, you clone, and then you brush over this area like this. So you are basically copying the pixels from this area, you are brushing it here. You can adjust the flow and opacity. To get a more realistic result, it's good to reduce the flow of the clone so that it doesn't completely copy the sampled area 100%, so that the clone can look more natural. So you hold Alt to sample and then you brush over areas like this to heal. So you go over all the areas that has blemishes. That is how the clone stamp tool works. And so if you come and display the arrows, you can see areas that have been cloned, and you can still make other adjustments to readjust the source point of the cloning. Also, you have the remove spot. You can use the remove spot like this. You can adjust the size of your brush, and then you click over the area you want to remove the spot. You can adjust the size, you can reduce the size, and you can move this over any area of the image. So what the remove spot basically does, it removes spots from your image. From areas that has spot, you remove the spot. That's how the remove spot works. But I barely use the remove spot I go for the healing brush and the cloning mask. So that's how to work on the clone layers. We are going to go into more details, because you can see that most area we have cloned here is not even looking that perfect. And since this is not the final stage of retouching, you can still be okay with this. We can leave it at this point. So from the clone layer, we can also create another similar layer, which is the heal layer. So the heal layer uses the remove spot, the draw, and the healing marks. Is almost the same, if not the same. So you can adjust the source. So we are just going over what we've just already discussed. So you can increase the size of the spot remover, the radius, and you can use the type and use dust or spot. And by seeing effect in return, you can see exactly what is happening. So this spot remover, the Capture One is going to use AI to remove the spot for you. So this is exactly how it works. You can go over every other areas of your image to remove the spot using either the cloning marks or the healing marks. So to remove the layer, click on the minus button. If you're on any of the layers and click on the minus button, you are going to remove those layers. This is how to remove layers. So the cursor tools take some of the adjustment tools right here and make them available for easy access. So basically we covered almost all the sections, and one last thing we are going to take note of is the Luma range. If you've used Photoshop before, this is called the blend if or the blending option. So the Luma range, we can use the Luma range to adjust the areas the particular layer marks is going to affect. So let me show you. Let's create a fill adjustment. Let's name this fill adjustment. I'll just name it fill. And now let's make this basic adjustment to the fill in the color balance master. We increase the reds. Now for the Luma range, if you click on the Luma range, we can adjust the particular area this fill adjustment is going to affect using the Luma range. So it is the extreme left, which is the dark area, and this is the extreme right, which is the bright area. So if you move this portion, if you move this like this, it means you are moving or removing this layer effect from the dark areas of your image. You can also adjust the fading like this by moving this arrow down here, by increase the fading effect. So if you move it to create a straight vertical line like this, it means the Luma range effect is very hard, but you can soften the effect using the fading option down here. The same thing applies to this area. This is the fader, and this is the movement of the Luma range. So you can adjust it as much as you want. This is the fallout. You can see the fallout amount here. You can adjust it as much as you want. The same thing applies to this area. You see the numbers. You can manually impute them. We can move to see how it works, just like this. You can also adjust the radius of the Luma range. The radius affects the pixels or the surface area. This is more, the effect is more on the pixels, while by moving to 300, effect is more on the surface area, and anywhere in between determines how much of it. So you can also move the sensitivity slider. It increases how sensitive the Luma range is affecting the overall image. This sensitivity value of 100, this is sensitivity value of 0, and display the marks so that I see exactly how it's affecting your image by moving them. So this is exactly how it works. Also invert the range so that areas that were selected is going to be selected and areas that were unselected is going to be selected. It's exactly how it works. So right now you can either apply or remove. Well, you've basically understand what I've shown you from start. So let's remove this effect and let's delete this adjustment. So if you want to be sure, you want to understand how well exposed your image is, you can toggle on the exposure warning. If you click on this exposure warning right now and you zoom into your image, you can see this red overlay right here is showing warning that this area is very bright. Let's toggle it off. If you toggle it on, it means this area is very bright. So you can basically use the exposure warning to adjust the exposure of your image. If you toggle it on, let me show you one in the background layer. If we come to our exposure section, and then for the exposure, if we increase the exposure, you can see that it's showing us that these areas are already overexposed. It's clipping. It means it's losing details in these regions. If you turn it off, you are going to see that. If you turn it on, you are going to see it. So you can basically turn this on and make adjustments so that you recover all the details. In the layer section, you can also see other options right here. We have the linear gradient marks. This is how to use the linear gradient marks. You click on the linear gradient map and then you move what the area you want to affect changes. Let's see down here, I want to darken down here. This is the feeder range, or this is the area that's being affected. You can adjust the brush like this and adjust it like this also. So now to see, you can adjust this particular area like this. You see, this is how the radial gradient affects your image. That's the linear gradient affects your image. Then we have the radial gradient. So let me show you how to use the radial gradient marks. To use it, let's create a new empty layer. Now take the gradient marks and we are going to draw over area like this. So this area that is red is the area that the effect is going to be applied to. So right now the red overlay is showing areas that the effect is going to apply to. I can also adjust the size or the shape of the gradient like this. Adjust it like this and move it around like this. So when you are okay with the area, you can use this to add vignettes to our image. So let's darken the other areas, bring more focus to this particular portion. So to hide, you know what to do, press M shortcut on your keyboard to hide the max visibility. You can make adjustment like this to your image. Now, so if you are done with editing with Capture One, I've shown you all the section, all the areas you are going to touch in Capture One, and if after everything you are done with the whole process, you want to open your image in another photo editing software, you are going to go to Image, Edit With, and you are going to click on Adobe Photoshop, and this image is going to open in Adobe Photoshop. Or you can click on any other photo editing software that is going to appear here. You can browse the particular one if you're not seeing the option you want here. If you click on Edit With, it's going to continue editing in Photoshop, and if you click on Open With, it's going to open the original image in Photoshop. So that is how it works. But if you are done and want to save, just come to Export, and then you can click on the file type You can click on multiple file types or the particular one you want. I click on export. It's going to show invalid output path. You are going to specify where you want to save your file. So select this portion and our image is going to export in the background. Click on embed color profile. Then for the quality, you are going to change it to by cubic sharper for a sharper image. You can see how sharp our image is right now. Very sharp. Then you're going to click on save. Find a folder where you want to save and to that area. So this is the end of the retouching course. If you have any inquiry, you can reach out to me on Instagram. If you have my WhatsApp, you can contact me on WhatsApp. Also, for those of you that are very busy, we offer retouching services. That is, you can send us your image and then we edit them for you. High-end retouching at a very affordable rate. So even after learning this, if you want us, we can edit your images for you. Just reach out to me on Instagram. If there are other stuff you need, you can reach out to me on Instagram. If you have any question, you can ask me on Instagram. See you in another one.